Welcome back to your favorite channel, where real stories meet raw emotions. Today, we bring you a heartbreaking story that feels almost too painful to believe. It is a story of love, sacrifice, and a cruel twist of fate that shattered a dream built over years. 90 Day Fiancé star Sumit Singh and his wife Jenny Slatin invested their entire life savings, nearly $1 million, to build a restaurant. Through years of hard work and dedication, they finally saw their dream come true. The restaurant was running successfully, and their future looked hopeful. But yesterday afternoon, tragedy struck without warning. A sudden and unexpected fire broke out at the restaurant. During the blaze, Sumit Singh became trapped inside. He suffered severe burns over nearly 40% of his body and was rushed to the hospital. He is now in the ICU, fighting for his life. Jenny Slatin has been left completely broken, both mentally and emotionally. She is facing the terrifying possibility of losing her husband, while also watching the dream they built together turn to ashes. The restaurant, created with years of sacrifice, is gone. The family has suffered an estimated financial loss of around $1.2 million. Today, everything they worked for has collapsed. On one side, their business has been destroyed. On the other, Sumit is battling for survival. This is not just a news story. It is a deeply human story of pain, resilience, and heartbreak. Sumit Singh and Jenny Slatin were never strangers to hardship. Their love story was tested in front of the world on 90 Day Fiancé. Cultural differences, family opposition, and a large age gap created constant challenges. Yet through it all, they stood side by side, determined to prove that love could overcome anything. For them, the restaurant was never just a business. It was a symbol of their journey together. Every brick laid, every chair placed, and every recipe perfected carried years of struggle and sacrifice. Jenny once said, "This restaurant is our child. We built it with love." Sumit shared the same feeling, quietly but deeply. They spent countless sleepless nights planning menus, designing the interior, and dealing with suppliers. They wanted the restaurant to reflect both of their worlds, Indian warmth and American hospitality. Customers loved the fusion. It was more than food. It was an experience. People didn't come only to eat. They came to witness a love story that had crossed borders, traditions, and expectations. The $1 million investment was not about getting rich. It was about building a legacy. Jenny and Sumit dreamed of leaving behind something meaningful, something that would last beyond them. By early 2025, the restaurant had become well known. Locals admired their courage, and fans of 90 Day Fiancé traveled long distances just to meet them. Jenny would often look across the busy dining hall at Sumit and whisper, "We did it." He would smile, knowing their dream had finally taken shape. But dreams can be fragile. They can shatter in a single moment. Fate had other plans, and the foundation they built with love was about to be tested in the cruelest way. When Jenny and Sumit first imagined opening a restaurant, it felt almost impossible. They had no experience in the food business. What they had was belief, determination, and the courage to risk everything. They poured nearly $1 million into the project, knowing it represented their entire future. Friends warned them. Many said restaurants fail every day. But Jenny and Sumit refused to give up. This was their chance to prove that love and hard work could create something special. The early days were exhausting. Construction delays tested their patience. Payments drained their savings. Every decision felt heavy. Jenny stayed up late planning decor, while Sumit worked endlessly with contractors. There were moments when the pressure almost broke them, but they always reminded each other why they started. Slowly, things began to fall into place. The restaurant opened with a menu that blended Indian spices with Western comfort food. It reflected their love story perfectly. Customers were curious, and soon the restaurant was full of life. Fans traveled from different cities just to see them. Locals embraced their warmth. Success didn't come overnight, but it came steadily. Families celebrated birthdays there. Couples shared romantic dinners. Tourists took photos with the couple behind the counter. Jenny's laughter filled the space, and Sumit's calm presence made everyone feel welcome. Together, they created more than a restaurant. They created a place of connection and culture. By early 2025, The restaurant stood as a symbol of triumph. Against all odds, they had built something real. Jenny often looked around and whispered, "This is our miracle." Sumit would smile, knowing every sacrifice had been worth it. But miracles are fragile. Beneath the joy, fate was preparing its cruelest twist. For most people, $1 million is unimaginable. For Jenny and Sumit, it was everything they had. Every saved penny, every sacrifice, every postponed dream. That money was their entire life. They knew the risk. They knew failure would mean losing everything. Still, they believed in their love and their vision. The restaurant was designed to tell their story. Photos on the walls showed their journey. The menu carried memories of both cultures. Customers didn't just eat there. They became part of the story. The investment was never about wealth. It was about legacy. They dreamed of expanding, of inspiring others, of proving that love could build something lasting. For a while it worked. The restaurant thrived. Fans called it a symbol of hope. Locals called it home. But beneath the success was constant fear. There was no backup plan. No safety net. One night, as they locked up the restaurant, Jenny whispered, "We've put everything into this. If anything happens, we lose it all." Sumit held her hand and reassured her. But fate was already writing a different ending. And then, in a single afternoon, everything changed. The restaurant was full of life. Conversations filled the air. The smell of spices drifted through the dining hall, and laughter echoed from every table. Jenny stood at the counter, smiling warmly at a family celebrating a birthday. Sumit was in the kitchen, carefully preparing one of their signature dishes. Everything felt perfect. Then, without warning, fate struck. At first, there was only a faint smell of smoke. Jenny thought it was a small kitchen issue, something that could be handled quickly. But within minutes, the situation turned terrifying. Flames burst out near the storage area, spreading faster than anyone could react. Panic took over. Customers screamed and rushed toward the exits as the crackling sound of fire grew louder. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Jenny's heart began to race. She screamed Sumit's name, but the smoke was thick and the heat unbearable. In the chaos, she saw him trapped inside, desperately trying to escape. The fire had surrounded him. Before anyone could reach him, the flames swallowed the kitchen. Jenny's cries filled the air, desperate and helpless. Firefighters arrived quickly, but the fire was relentless. The restaurant that had taken years of sacrifice and love to build was destroyed within hours. Walls collapsed. The decor they had carefully chosen turned to rubble. Their $1 million dream disappeared in smoke and ashes. But the greatest loss was not the restaurant. It was Sumit. When rescuers finally pulled him out, nearly 40% of his body had been badly burned. He was rushed to the hospital and taken straight to the ICU. His life hung by a thread. Jenny stood there, covered in soot and tears, barely able to stand. Her world had collapsed before her eyes. The fire was more than an accident. It was a cruel twist of fate. In one afternoon, everything they had built and dreamed of was gone. Standing outside the burning ruins, Jenny clutched her chest and whispered, "Why us? Why now?" The fire was eventually put out, but the damage it left behind was far from over. As the smoke cleared, Sumit Singh was fighting for his life in the hospital. His body carried the brutal scars of the fire. Nearly 40% of his skin was burned. His breathing was weak and his pulse fragile. The man who once stood proudly behind the counter, welcoming guests with a smile, now lay motionless in the ICU. Machines surrounded him, beeping softly with every fragile heartbeat. Tubes ran across his body. Thick bandages covered his burns. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the room. Stood outside the ICU, her hands shaking, her eyes swollen from crying. She had never felt so powerless. The love of her life was fighting a battle she could not fight for him. Inside the ICU, every second mattered. Doctors explained that burn injuries were unpredictable. Complications could happen at any moment. Infection, organ failure, shock. Each word felt heavier than the last. Jenny listened in silence, her heart breaking. She wanted answers. She wanted certainty. But all she could do was pray. Memories flooded her mind. The first time she met Sumit. Their laughter. their struggles, the long nights planning the restaurant, the joy of seeing their dream come true. Now, all of it felt like it could disappear at any moment. Standing by the glass window, Jenny whispered softly, "Please don't leave me. We've come too far." The hospital hallway was quiet, broken only by the sound of footsteps from nurses passing by. Friends and family gathered nearby, their faces filled with fear. Everyone understood how serious the situation was. Sumit was not only fighting for his life, he was fighting for their shared dream and a love story that had inspired millions. As night fell, Jenny refused to leave. She sat outside the ICU holding a photograph from the restaurant's grand opening. Their smiling faces stared back at her, a painful reminder of how quickly life can change. Sumit's battle was far from over. The fire had scarred his body, but his spirit was still holding on. Jenny, broken yet determined, promised herself she would stay by his side for as long as it took. Jenny Slatton had always been strong. She stood firm through cultural struggles, family opposition, and the pressure of reality television. But nothing prepared her for seeing her husband lying in the ICU, wrapped in bandages, his life hanging in the balance. The fire had not only burned Sumit's body, it had shattered Jenny's spirit. Standing outside his hospital room, she felt the walls closing in. Her mind replayed the nightmare again and again. The flames, the screams, the moment she realized Sumit was trapped inside. Each memory cut deeper. Jenny's pain was not only about Sumit's condition. It was about losing everything they had built together. The restaurant was their dream, their child, their legacy. Now it was nothing more than ashes. The money, the years of planning, the sleepless nights, all gone in one afternoon. She sat in the hospital corridor, holding her phone, scrolling through photos of happier times. The grand opening, Sumit smiling in the kitchen, customers laughing at their tables. Each image felt like a cruel reminder of what had been lost. She whispered to herself, "How do I go on from here?" Her heartbreak was visible to everyone. Friends tried to comfort her, but their words felt empty. Family stood by her side, but the pain was too deep to ease. Jenny was not only facing the possible loss of her husband, she was mourning the future they had planned together. At night, she stayed by Sumit's side, whispering prayers and begging him to hold on. Her tears fell onto his bandaged hand as she said, "You promised me forever. Please don't break that promise." In one moment, Jenny had everything. A successful restaurant, a loving husband, a dream fulfilled. In the next, she was left with fear, heartbreak, and uncertainty. The fire destroyed their restaurant, but it also lit a storm inside Jenny's heart. A storm that would only calm if Sumit survived. The morning after the fire, the world felt unrecognizable. Where the restaurant once stood, filled with warmth, laughter, and life, there were now only blackened ruins. The building was gone, the decor destroyed, the kitchen reduced to twisted metal. Their million-dollar dream had collapsed overnight. Jenny walked slowly through the remains. The smell of smoke clung to the air and to her clothes. Every step felt heavy. Every corner told a story. Stories of birthdays celebrated, anniversaries shared, customers who became friends. Now, all that remained was silence. Jenny stood silently among the ruins, her eyes tracing the blackened walls and broken furniture. This place had once been filled with warmth, love, and dreams. Now it felt cold and empty. Ash crunched beneath her feet as she walked through what remained of the dining area. The tables were gone. The chairs were burned beyond recognition. The counter where she once greeted customers was nothing more than scorched wood and twisted metal. She closed her eyes and could almost hear the laughter again. The sound of glasses clinking. The voices of families enjoying meals. Sumit's calm voice calling orders from the kitchen. For a moment, it all felt real. Then she opened her eyes, and the silence reminded her of the truth. This was no longer their restaurant. Jenny sank to her knees, unable to hold herself up any longer. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered Sumit's name. The place that represented their future now stood as a painful reminder of everything they had lost. Back at the hospital, Sumit remained in critical condition. Doctors continued to monitor him closely, adjusting medications, checking vitals, and watching for signs of complications. Burn injuries were complex, they explained. Recovery would be slow, painful, and uncertain. Each update left Jenny feeling both hopeful and terrified. One moment, the doctors would say he was stable. The next, they would warn her that the next 24 hours were crucial. Jenny lived in constant fear, jumping at every sound, every call from the nurse's station. She barely slept. When she did, nightmares haunted her. She dreamed of fire, of smoke, of calling Sumit's name and never hearing his voice answer back. Days passed, then weeks. The financial reality soon began to sink in. With the restaurant destroyed, their only source of income was gone. Insurance paperwork piled up, filled with confusing terms and endless delays. Investigations began to determine the cause of the fire. Each question felt like another burden placed on her already breaking heart. Medical bills began to arrive. ICU care, surgeries, medications, and specialized burn treatments came with overwhelming costs. Jenny stared at the numbers, unsure how they would survive financially even if Sumit survived physically. Friends and supporters reached out. Messages poured in from fans around the world. Strangers sent prayers, kind words, and small donations. Jenny was grateful, but the weight of everything still felt unbearable. Despite the pain, she refused to give up. Every day, she visited Sumit. She spoke to him even when he could not respond. She told him about the support they were receiving. She reminded him of their love, their memories, and the life they still had ahead of them. "People are waiting for you," she whispered. "I'm waiting for you." Slowly, signs of progress appeared. Sumit began responding to treatment. His breathing improved. Doctors cautiously described him as stable. It wasn't a miracle, but it was hope. Jenny clung to that hope with everything she had. Physical recovery, they explained, would take months, possibly years. Skin grafts, therapy, pain management, emotional trauma. The road ahead would be long and difficult. But Sumit was alive. When he finally opened his eyes for the first time, Jenny felt her heart stop. She rushed to his side, holding his hand gently, afraid of hurting him. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered his name. He could not speak. Tubes still surrounded him, but his eyes found hers. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The restaurant, the money, the future they had planned, all of it faded away. All that mattered was that he was still here. As Sumit slowly regained strength, Jenny became his caregiver, his voice, his strength. She helped doctors communicate with him. She encouraged him during painful treatments. She stayed strong when he felt weak. There were moments of frustration, moments of anger, moments when Sumit questioned why this had happened to them. Jenny had no answers. All she could do was hold his hand and remind him that they were still together. Outside the hospital, life continued, but Jenny felt disconnected from it. The world felt unfamiliar now. Simple things like sunlight, laughter, and noise felt overwhelming. Still, she refused to let despair win. She began speaking openly about their experience, hoping to raise awareness about fire safety and burn recovery. She wanted their pain to mean something. If their story could save even one life, she believed it would give purpose to their suffering. Slowly, plans for the future began to take shape. Not the future they once imagined, but a new one. A different one. They no longer talked about rebuilding the restaurant right away. Healing came first. Survival came first. Love came first. Sumit's recovery became their new journey. Each small step forward felt like a victory. Sitting up, speaking again, holding Jenny's hand tighter. Through it all, Jenny remained by his side. She had lost a business. She had lost financial security. She had lost the life she thought she knew. But she had not lost Sumit. And that was enough. The fire had taken so much from them. But it had not taken their love. It had not taken their will to survive. And it had not taken their story. Their journey was far from over. It had simply changed.